Welcome to the CBN Pod Live, episode 1, technically episode 1, right, Matt? Welcome. You can now see our faces, Jackson Farough and Matt Betts with you. Matt, this is exciting, isn't it?
It is. I don't know if you want to see our faces or not, but here we are. They were the faces behind the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. We're thrilled to be on here doing post-game live for select Blue Jays games this season. We hope you enjoy it.
So, yeah, a little bit about kind of what these are. We're going to be doing these, I would say, more so in afternoons. I think to start this season, Matt, want to do some more video, talk to the people a little more. You can't just avoid our voices. You also can't avoid our faces as well. Okay. I think what we're going to do is primarily big games, right? So opening day, we'll do a live stream post game, chat a little bit about what we're doing, and then throughout the season as well. And don't worry, folks, in addition to our usual podcast, we'll still have great guests and still great conversations like we always do. I think maybe, Matt, I don't know where you want to start exactly. Spring training. It's been a really interesting spring training for the Jays, I would say. And you were lucky enough to go.
Yeah, it certainly has been interesting. And again, I was down there for 5 days last Thursday. I got back on Tuesday. I don't want to touch too much on the game today because at the end of the day, it's the end of spring training, and I think people are about over it. So, but yeah, spring training was a lot of fun. It was warmer than it is here, although the temperature's starting to turn. But yeah, it was a great time down there, and a lot of insight gained from that.
It's interesting, right? Like spring training, you watch TV, beautiful weather every day. And then today, I don't know about you, where you live, but it's snowing here where I live today in southwestern Ontario. It's crazy still, even though we're a week out from opening day. So the weather must have been quite a reprieve from Ontario.
Yeah, it was sunny and warm for most of it. I mean, I was driving down with my windows down, and there was one day that it rained kind of at the end of the game. Apparently, there was a tornado watch. I think I slept right through that. But I don't know. Going to school in Alabama, I got used to some of those. So maybe it didn't bother me as much as some others.
Fair enough. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit, getting into spring training now, like the Blue Jays complex, that facility. You spent some time down there. Tell us a little bit firsthand account what that was like.
Yeah, it's nice. Like I can definitely see how it would be a selling feature to free agents. I mean, it's not going to be probably the top thing guys are looking for, but it doesn't hurt. I mean, the 6 fields, I think there are, a nice media room. The main building's beautiful. The locker room is top notch, and just action everywhere. For any fans that ever get a chance to go there, I would definitely recommend it. All the minor league guys, all the pro guys, all the big league guys. It's certainly a beautiful facility, and I can see how that really aids in player development.
And I think too, like not just the player development, but like you mentioned, selling people, right? By all accounts, Shohei Ohtani went down there, had a look, really liked the facility, really helped their chances. Santander mentioned it. All these guys, Scherzer, they all mention it. Speaking of Scherzer, actually, that's a good one. You had the chance to participate in some of his media availabilities, correct? Tell us a little bit about that experience, talking to a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, obviously, it was kind of a downer note because he was talking about his bum thumb. So that's going to obviously impact things as the season moves along. John Schneider said this morning it's something that they're probably going to be dealing with all season. Very matter-of-fact guy. Kind of what you see is what you get with Max Scherzer. And, he spoke a little bit about that thumb and what the next steps are. I think they were trying to get him off a mound again today. And if that goes well into a game this weekend and opening day is still on the table, he sounded frustrated by it for sure. I think the underlying tone was frustration, something that's just been kind of nagging. And I found it interesting that John Schneider said that he's going to throw off a mound today and then potentially get into a game on the weekend, because it didn't seem like he had a major appetite to pitch through something like this. He was really worried about how it will impact his shoulder health and other issues that he's had. Obviously, he had that teres major issue. Pitching in Toronto a couple of seasons ago. There's a scap issue last year. So his main concern wasn't even necessarily with the thumb. It was how that can kind of go up the arm and cause other issues throughout the season that will put him on the shelf for longer.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? Is how it's not just the thumb, and he mentioned it, how it could affect, his shoulder in different parts. Schneider's saying that's going to be something they're dealing with all year. Not something you want to hear if you're a Jays fan, that's for sure, right?
I mean, that's the risk you run by signing a 40-something-year-old starting pitcher. Unfortunately, I mean, this is. Yeah. I'm going to have a piece coming on the Canadian Baseball Network in the next few days about the rotation and some of the concerns, but how it's also going to have to carry this team. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about the lineup here. But the starting rotation is going to be, I think, what sets this team apart if they want to make a run to the playoffs.
And it feels like when healthy, this is one of the best rotations in the American League, right? And I don't think that's too much up for debate, but that's a big if, right? Because these guys are older. You've got a real kind of interesting combination of guys like Scherzer, Bassett, Gosman, who are getting older, and guys like Bowden Francis, Yariel Rodriguez, who are kind of unproven, being able to handle that amount of work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I asked John Schneider about the health of the rotation and certain things that they can do to kind of work with because they have 4 guys at over 30. I mean, Barrios, Gosman, Bassett, Scherzer are all over 30. Scherzer's over 40. So keeping these guys healthy over the long run is critical. They have a little bit more starting depth this year than they have in the past, but at the same time, those 5 guys you're going to need to perform if this team wants to make the playoffs.
And you mentioned like signing a 41, I think he's 41, Scherzer, right? The risk that runs, got to think that they'd feel pretty confident about a guy like Bowden Francis to be able to throw 150, 180 innings this year, even Rodriguez if he has to, given the fact that no one lied about his age when they signed him, right?
Yeah, I mean, Francis looked pretty good today against the Rays. Yeah. I mean, so he's going into the season on a good start. And yeah, I mean, the talk all offseason once they signed Scherzer was if they can get 20 starts out of him, 25 starts out of him, they'd be happy with that, which means he's going to miss 10 to 15 starts potentially. And does that happen at the beginning of the year? Does it make sense to have that happen at the beginning of the year with this thumb issue and just get it corrected for the remainder of the year? Or is it something that, like John Schneider said, you're going to have to work through the rest of the season, which obviously isn't encouraging news for Blue Jays fans.
Like, I guess at this point, if he can give you even 15 starts, you'd probably take that, right? The old if I told you game, if you could lock in 15 starts, you'd probably take that for the Jays, right?
You would think so, yeah. I mean, it's not exactly encouraging news. Right? It's $1 million a start, so I don't know if you're feeling real good about that economically. But yeah, I mean, if you can make it to the playoffs and you can be ready for the playoffs and you can give you 15 to 20 starts, I mean, I guess that you got to take that. But I guess we'll see today. I mean, a lot's unknown. He did talk about how the thumb issue, it's around the 50 pitch mark. It starts flaring up, but it's not even so much during the outing, he was saying. Yeah. It's after the fact. It's the next day. It's the day after, and how it kind of feels there. So, I mean, we'll see. It's a wait and see, and they'll obviously translate that information to us as they see fit.
Going to be interesting to see, certainly. There's been a couple of great stories, I think, this spring. Obviously you were down there, you would know a bunch, but I think one that stood out to me is how many guys are hitting well. It's just spring, whatever, right? But, you'd rather them hit than not, right? Guys like Bo Bichette, he's been just a monster. One guy I really liked, and not just because of today, but overall, is that Will Wagner. And I wonder if he should be the leadoff hitter.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of heard John Schneider say that they want to go Bichette, Guerrero, Santander 1 through 3. I don't know if I agree with that. I understand the concept. You want to get them all up in the first inning. You want to get them as many at-bats as possible. I just feel, especially without Varsho, not knowing where Varsho is going to land to start the season, I worry that it shortens the lineup to an extent. And what I mean by that is 4 through 9, that's a pretty big drop off between those 5 guys, 6 guys, and the first 3 guys. So you're really banking on, if you can get a Wagner in there, say in the leadoff spot, and now Santander is hitting 4th, it kind of lengthens the lineup out a little bit. And then Varsho comes back and everything pencils in as needed. But if Wagner can hit in that leadoff spot, I love his bat to ball skills. I think they're fantastic. And I think he kind of profiles as a leadoff hitter, as much of a leadoff hitter as the Jays have at this point.
Yeah.
And then that bumps Bichette to 2, Guerrero to 3, and Santander to 4, which I think would be ideal in my opinion. No one asked me, but that's my opinion. But it sounds like they want to go 1, 2, 3 with Bichette, Guerrero, and Santander.
And it's interesting because one thing I've been thinking of this spring is who hits behind those guys, right? And does that kind of factor in? Because all of a sudden it's looking like it's going to be either George Springer or Andres Jimenez. No disrespect to either of them. I don't want either of those guys hitting 4th or 5th. I don't think you're going very far if either or both of those guys is hitting 4th and 5th in your lineup, right? So that's where if you get a guy like Wagner hitting leadoff, pushes everyone down. But still, Matt, I don't know about you. The middle of this lineup is something I'm still a little worried about. I've not liked the way George Springer has looked this spring at all.
And we talked about this last year. I mean, I said this before last year that they weren't going to hit. They weren't going to score a lot of runs. And they really, obviously the lineup was the biggest concern last year. They're a better lineup this year than they were last year. There's no doubt about that. But George Springer, man, like he cannot be hitting 4 for you. I mean, he's got to be hitting 7, 8 and take what you can get because I know spring training stats They are what they are. You don't read too much into them, but he has not looked good at the plate. Andres Jimenez, you're not real sure what you're going to get. He hit 252 last year, low OPS, but you don't need him to slug. I mean, you need him to. If he hits 252, you're probably pretty happy and play goal club defense. Varsho is a big question mark. John Schneider kind of threw cold water on that idea for him starting the year.
He's looked great
on the roster. I think you have to. I mean, you look at their April schedule and the March-April schedule. It's tough. Like you need all the bats in there you can. And if he has to plug up the DH spot for a few weeks while he gets his arm figured out, I think you have to do that. But it sounds like as of right now, that's probably not going to be the case.
I do want to quickly run through this schedule for the Jays to start off the year, because it is crazy, Matt. So they host Baltimore and Washington to start here coming up next week. Then they go on the road. They're at New York Mets home opener in there, at Boston, at Orioles. They come back and they host Atlanta and Seattle. Then they're back on the road at Houston, at Yankees, and then they host Boston to wrap up April. That is brutal, Matt. Wow.
I mean, maybe it's good that you get that kind of really tough stretch out of the way, but if you go 8 games under 500 there, you're in trouble in this division. So, yeah, I think you got to put your best lineup on the field, regardless of, if Varsho can swing it, which he obviously can. I mean, I think he's got to be in there.
He's looked terrific, and I wonder what kind of – obviously there's been some clear adjustments made. The big thing with Varsho, it's kind of tantalizing, right? We talked about it the last few years ever since they acquired him. Love the defense, love the sprint speed, love the player, everything. Power there. The only thing, what's missing? Contact, right? Guy does not get on base enough, and frankly, he doesn't drive the ball enough, right? So when you have those things happening, it's tricky. Too many pop-ups, right? If he can make that adjustment, though, Matt, and he can slug a little more than he has in the last couple of years, it doesn't have to be huge with how good his defense is. I mean, it really makes you, for me, he's a player I've always dreamed of. Can he be that 6-WAR player that you need? And, I think it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. Yeah, right over there.
Yeah, no, I just having some issues with my camera here. We're good.
Good. Yeah. So I'm looking down this lineup. Maybe a guy I also want to talk about, sort of Andres Jimenez, the infield equivalent of Dalton Varsho. Your thoughts on him maybe this spring and kind of where you'd like to see him fit in an ideal world, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, he's hit pretty well. You get it's like Varsho. You're going to get the Gold Glove defense out of him, and that's going to make up for a little bit that he lacks with the bat. I think he hits in the bottom of the order. I don't think do you try him at the top? There's just so many guys that are very similar on this Jays roster. Jimenez, Wagner. Are you going to get a ton of production out of them at the top? I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see. But again, I think he gets at the bottom of the order, and you just rely on his defense. And that makes up for any shortcomings of the bat. That was the point of the transaction at the time, right? Like no one expected him to come in here and hit 300 and hit 20 home runs.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I like the fit. I keep coming back to, is there enough oomph in the middle of this lineup? Love Santander, but Springer, I was just looking at his stats. So I think I said this last year, and it followed through again in 2024. Springer, since arriving in Toronto, his slugging percentage has dropped each year he's been here. His first year, 555. He's all the way down last year, a 371 slug in 600 plate appearances. So that's concerning, right? And that could go down even more.
You knew when they signed that contract that the end years were going to look a little rough. But I think the fall off has been even more dramatic than they expected. And then maybe even a little sooner than they expected.
Yeah.
He's not producing much. And if Varsho's not in center field and you have Santander and Springer in the corners, who's going to play center?
Yeah.
That Joey Loperfido? Is that Miles? I think Miles, that opens the door for Miles Straw because you need a defender out there with those two guys in the corners.
This front office seems like
bat to the lineup, which makes the lineup even thinner 4 through 9.
That's the thing.
That's kind of the issue that you're dealing with.
It's one thing to have Varsho hitting whatever it is 9th playing center field, but to have Miles Straw, that's a whole nother thing. And then on top of that, you're right, Matt, like Springer, he doesn't bring a lot. He does walk a little bit. He'll get on base. But yeah, as a corner outfielder, you need more than that. And that's what brings up the Alan Roden conversation, right? That's been a big topic this spring because, first of all, it starts at the beginning. GM Ross Atkins, he never calls anybody out ever. And he called it Alan Roden and said, I want to see what this kid's got. And what did he do? Well, he's put up a sparkling spring. He's been a machine hitting for power, getting on base. He's faster than you might think on the bases, right? So, I mean, for me, Matt, I don't understand. I mean, I think very quickly, based on the start of the season, as we outlined, you can't really be trying to give Springer too much run. Like, if it's not working for him, he's got to be either hitting lower in the lineup or he's riding the pine 2 or 3 times a week for Alan Roden.
I think he's going to get run, though. I really do. And I don't think Roden's going to break camp with this team. I think, should he? Again, I don't want to read too much into spring training numbers. I think he's got the tools. I think, going down to AAA to start the year and let him, tear it up down there and see where you're at maybe a month in might be the best course of action. But George Springer's making $25 million a year. He's going to be playing right field for this team on opening day. That's just the way it's going to be.
I think that's the hard pill to swallow for a lot of Jays fans, right? And I think one thing you hope is that Springer can at least provide some more production than last year. Can he give you an OPS above 740? I think that's the hope. And I know you're basically asking him to be a little over a league average hitter, but it's hard, right? $25 million bucks. You mentioned it. I think he's still got next year on his deal. You were hoping, and they've mentioned on the broadcast that they would have already had those deep runs by now, maybe even had a ring or two. It obviously didn't happen like that. Haven't won a playoff game. In terms, though, of, I guess, optics or a clubhouse or whatever, he seems like a real leader in that clubhouse, Springer does, right? So I think, too, you mentioned it. I think he needs to be the starting right fielder and really kind of play a lot early based on kind of the way the team values him off the field. I wonder what that does to the locker room if you bench him, if that affects the vibes at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a character attack on the guy. It's a matter of he's not hitting. He
stinks. Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, he's not producing, and if that carries in through a month, 2 months, 3 months, I mean, you can't keep running that out there with the pressure that's on this organization to win. I mean, that's just the bottom line. If he's not hitting and Alan Roden's tearing it up at AAA, you're going to have to make a move at some point. That's just the reality of the situation.
You mentioned pressure, big time pressure. Speaking of pressure, I want to talk about the bullpen quickly here. I'm not going to go too much longer. We don't want these live streams to be a million years. Just kind of want to give the fans a little sense of kind of some news and notes on the Jays as we wrap up spring training. Swanson has the arm issue. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a year-long issue, but something that he'll be dealing with early on. Zach Pop sounds like he's dealing with an issue as well. That came up yesterday and today. You look at this bullpen, renovated, we'll call it, revitalized perhaps since last year. Shapiro, named it at the end of the season last year, saying the bullpen was awful and it was a huge disappointment for us. So they go out, they spend some money to get Jeff Hoffman. Yimi Garcia comes back. You go and make the trade for Nick Sandlin. Chad Green returns. There's some guys there now. Even Brandon Little is coming back after a solid season last year. What do you make of the bullpen? And specifically, early on, it's going to be tested, isn't it?
I think it's good. I think it's, you got your closer in Hoffman. He should be elite. You have Jimmy Garcia, who's looked just like he did last year in Toronto. So that's a positive. Yeah, guys like Brendan Little. It sounds like you're going to want 2 lefties in the bullpen. So you think that's probably Yarbrough, and then Yariel slides to the rotation if Scherzer's out.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily disagree. But the thing with that is you don't have a lefty in the rotation.
No.
It's very easy to match up against this team from a starting pitching lineup perspective if teams choose to do that. Nick Sandlin can get lefties out. His splits are impressive.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a useful guy if they do want to slide Yarbrough into the rotation at some point as an opener / 2 to 3 inning guy to start games. But yeah, I think it's okay. I'm not worried about the bullpen. It's probably the least of my worries. Once Swanson gets back, he had a cortisone injection. So once he's back, he slides in there probably as a 7th inning guy. So I think it's fine. It's going to be much better than it was last year. There's no doubt about that, which, I mean, it's hard to not be better than last year, but still. But yeah, I don't think it's a concern of the team heading into the season.
I don't think so either. And you mentioned Yarbrough. That's an interesting one, right? If he has to be making starts, how does that, even that Eric Lauer as well, right? He was maybe some depth at AAA as well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out. But one name that really has stood out to me, who I think is going to factor into this bullpen this year, is Mason Fluharty. Now, we saw him today. He has been electric. And Matt, you're a former pitcher. What I see is just a great delivery, but also I just love his stuff. He must be so hard on lefties. And I'm thinking, yes, you have Brandon Little, you have Yarbrough, more of a long man though. You get into a big series against, and I'm not talking in April necessarily, but maybe it's down the line, maybe it's the second half of the season. You're facing a Houston or the Yankees or somebody, and you get a big lefty at the plate, right? Maybe it's Boston with Rafael Devers. I mean, now you have multiple options. You have different guys. I see a guy like Flaherty actually playing a role, depending on how the season, of course, goes for the Jays.
I mean, don't forget, not many people knew who Brendan Little was before last year. I mean, these guys, that's the thing with bullpens. You get these guys that come out of nowhere. No one does that better than the Tampa Bay Rays. Guys that you've never heard of, and they come in. And it's a little bit of a development thing as well for them, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's another lefty option. Like I said, the pitching depth is much better than it was a year ago. They have options. You mentioned Eric Lauer in AAA. Obviously, you don't want him making too many starts for you, but he's an option if you need him. So I think the pitching depth is good. Again, it's going to come down to can they hit. I think the pitching is going to be good enough. Can they score enough runs, which I feel like we're saying the same thing 2 years in a row. But at the same time, the lineup is better. So I guess we'll see.
I'm excited, Matt. I'm fired up. Baseball's regular season baseball is just around the corner. Not to say spring isn't great, Matt, but you get to the fourth or fifth inning and you're like, all right, I'm ready for the real stuff now, right? Appreciate folks hopping on and watching us, our first ever live stream. More to come, obviously. We'll be up a week today, right around this time, actually a little later, to talk about the Blue Jays home opener / season opener against Baltimore. Lots of good stuff coming up this season, though. Matt, anything else from you before we say goodbye for now?
That's it. We'll see you at the home opener. And, yeah, looking forward to a great season ahead.
All right. Thanks, all. Take care, and see you next time.